All right, Saagar, what's on your radar?
Well, you can almost feel and close your eyes the wisps of 2008 around you. The stock market's tanking, the current administration isn't exactly projecting full confidence into the American economy, and even one of the same Democratic challengers speaks from the campaign trail about how they might be able to do a better job. But there are a lot of differences about this time around from last. First of all, of course, is the fact that it's been about 12 years. Joe Biden isn't exactly the same guy this time. But it doesn't stop him from trying to project big presidential energy in a speech laying out how he'd handle the coronavirus crisis and the ensuing economic crash.
The World Health Organization now has officially declared COVID-19 a pandemic. Downplaying it, being overly dismissive, or spreading misinformation is only going to hurt us and further advantage the spread of the disease. But neither should we panic or fall back on xenophobia. Labeling COVID-19 a foreign virus does not displace accountability for the misjudgments that have been taken thus far by the Trump administration.
Sounds like a perfectly anodyne speech, and if you're regularly going about your life, you might think, oh, okay, let's give him a shot. But the benefit of Biden's career is we actually know quite a bit about how he's going to behave in most situations, because he's been around for so long. In 2009, in the middle of swine flu sweeping the country, Biden advised that people should not use the airline industry anymore. Might seem reasonable in these current times, but it was squarely against the advice of that administration and healthcare professionals at the time, including their own president. Things got so bad that the Obama White House had to rebuke their own vice president from the White House press podium. And because he did such a terrible job, the press corps literally laughed at them. Let's take a listen.
My other question has to do with remarks that Vice President Biden made this morning on television. Representatives of the travel industry have accused the Vice President of coming close to fear-mongering because of his comments. And I'm wondering if you wanted to clarify or correct or apologize for the remarks that he made.
I think what the Vice President meant to say was the same thing that, again, many members have said in the last few days, what he said and what he meant to say.
With all due respect, and I sympathize with you trying to explain the Vice President's comments, but that's not even remotely close to what he said. He was asked about if a member of his family...
Jake, I understand what he said, and I'm telling you what he meant to say, which was that obviously if anybody was unduly alarmed for whatever reason, we would apologize for that, and I hope that my remarks and the remarks of the people at the CDC and Secretary Napolitano have appropriately cleared up what he meant to say.
That's who the real Joe Biden is. Not the highly choreographed person reading from a teleprompter that you saw in that presidential announcement, but beyond the man himself. Remember that as of this moment, one of the most important things that we must watch for is how either this president or whomever succeeds him will deal with the terrible economic fallout that is likely to occur as a result of the coronavirus. As of yesterday, JP Morgan estimated that GDP will shrink by 2% in the first quarter and 3% in the second. If in a so-called booming economy of a few months ago, the American middle class isn't seeing a raise now, how do you think they're going to do in a situation like that one? Biden's team is literally comprised of the same team of plutocrats that worked in the Obama administration and unleashed the current U.S. economy that we have today. It would be sheer insanity to turn the ship over back to the team that hollowed out the American economy and let workers and the middle class rot on the vine for 8 years while executives offshored jobs and traded derivatives got richer. As I laid out in my radar yesterday, the coronavirus crisis is, of course, an imminent threat to many of our everyday lives, and I want all of our viewers to take the precautions of government officials. But we have to also think about tomorrow, the next month, the next year, the next decade. Washington right now is defaulting to benefiting the wealthy and not helping the struggling American middle at the same time that we find out that maybe it wasn't such a good idea to move all pharmaceutical manufacturing over to China. The Trump administration has their flaws. I'm first to say so. But can we afford to seriously turn the reins over to the people who pioneered using a financial crisis to bail out the rich while the middle suffered, or striking trade deals rewarding corporations for shipping manufacturing capacity over to China and leaving us vulnerable where we are right now? It is that exact response which got us here. It is how Donald Trump is president, and it's all Joe Biden knows how to do. He might project big presidential energy in a speech, but underneath that is a story of millions of Americans who have suffered and are so tired of continuing to do so. And that's part of what I see, Crystal, in his speech is he's got this, he's got the prompter, he's got the flags, he's projecting the energy. And then, of course, how did he handle the last part? I mean, he has, look, the gaffes thing, instead of they try to excuse some of his behavior now as the gaffes of old. That's actually one of the gaffes of old that remains ever present throughout his entire career.
He meant to say.
What he meant
It's like a very
to
Trumpian
say.
moment.
Right.
Tweet speaks for itself.
Yeah, he meant to say. I mean, the press literally laughed at Robert Gibbs' face because they all knew what was happening, is that the vice president was inciting panic. I mean, he has misspoken and said, some foolish things many times over the years. But I thought it was a good example. But more importantly, what have we ever since that list came out from Axios of what that cabinet was going to look like, we know exactly how this government will go.
They've learned nothing.
We have learned, we know the script. They did it under Obama.
Yep.
Neoliberalism on steroids. And that is the issue, is like, how can you bring back the people who shipped all manufacturing over to China and left us vulnerable now in order to deal with the coronavirus crisis? It would be sheer insanity.
That is such a great point. While we're focusing on, okay, we got to deal with this crisis now.
And we do. Nobody's minimizing that.
Exactly. And we also have to think about, why are we in such a precarious position to start with? As you point out, why is Donald Trump president to start with? And a big part of it traces back to the way that the financial crisis was handled. That Wall Street gets bailed out, no one goes to prison, homeowners left to die on the vine. Corporations use it as an excuse to strip out their best paid, middle-class employees, to replace them with contractors, to replace them with lower wage, more precarious work. And so you had a dynamic where, going into the financial collapse, the majority of the jobs lost were middle income. The majority coming out were low wage. That's a big part of how we set up to have the economy that we have today, which has left so many workers in an incredibly precarious position to sustain any kind of health or economic blow. So we can't ignore the fact that Joe Biden was an integral part of that. So even as we think about, okay, who's best positioned to handle this crisis in the immediate aftermath, we also have to think about who's best set up to build a new kind of economy moving out of this. I mean, this to me is kind of the central dynamic between Biden and Bernie. Biden's just saying, let's think about the immediate. Let's just get Trump out. Let's just get Trump out and go back and everything will be fine. And Bernie's saying, no, we have to think about something beyond that. We have to think about how we got to this place. We have to use these moments in order to build something new that is going to be sustainable and ultimately work out for working class citizens. And you see that all there in remembering the response and how ultimately damaging it was to the economy. I mean, to me, to think about a Biden versus Trump choice, it just is incredibly depressing. Let me just say that.
And there are two reasons Donald Trump is president: Iraq and the financial crisis. Those are two. That's exactly how you can trace it all back to the invasion of Iraq in 2003 and the financial crisis of 2008. Because in 2008, what they did is they recapitalized banks, put in all these stress tests, made sure that the PMC, everybody was fine by 2010, right? Everybody in the PMC was back to work. Some people had lost their jobs. No doubt, I'm not minimizing any stress or hardship that was inflicted upon them. However, what ended up happening to lower wage and middle class workers? All their houses, wealth, intergenerational, everything they had amassed over years, gone. And then when they got to re-enter the job market, what ended up happening? Everybody was underemployed, or they didn't have benefits, or they had 1/3 wages of what they had in 2007. I mean, right now, people who are in the middle have basically not had a raise since 1997. What's the point of this whole thing? If you haven't had a raise in 30 years? years. The entire thing is crazy because who's he going to bring in? He's going to bring in the same Obama officials, people like Larry Summers, all these vice chairmen of Bank of America. They all know only one script. They don't even realize or understand what we're talking about. If you talk to them, they think that the way the financial crisis was handled was a masterclass because we got the stock market working again.
Well,
and that's not the American economy.
By the way, I mean, in this crisis, of course, what's the one thing that they've mobilized to inject $1.5 trillion injected into the stock market, and they're squabbling here over whether workers can get paid sick leave. Like, think about that distinction. And so, yeah, we don't want the status quo. We don't want the same old response that we've had to past crises. We need to do something fundamentally different. It's not enough to just rerun the playbook of 2008 because it's a big part of how we ended up where we are right now.
Yeah, exactly. There you go. All right, I'm looking forward to your radar next, Crystal.